So for our temperate grasslands, okay, the thing we were talking about here when we left off before was that there are different kinds of prairie, different kinds of temperate grasslands, some of which are more temperate than others. Okay, some are more desert-like than others. Okay, the one you see in the picture here, okay, from deep southern Alberta, is more like desert than it is like, you know, prairie per se. Okay, it's still prairie. There's lots of grass there, but it's pretty dry. Okay, it's short grass prairie. You're never going to see, you know, waving fields of grain or anything like that. Okay, down in southern Alberta, they have irrigation. Okay? They built a whole canal system. Okay, from like several dams that they built down there, okay, that help them to irrigate any crops that they have, because it's pretty hard to be successful without it. Okay? That can sometimes be used for pasture. At this point, it's not much good for that because there's not much living there anymore. Okay. Obviously, the other kind of prairie, okay, and I showed you this on the first slide. Oh, sorry, not the first slide, it's the next slide. Okay, so you've got the short grass prairie on the left, you've got mixed grass prairie on the right. Okay, these two pictures are taken 3 days apart. Right, one is deep southern Alberta, the other is St. Paul, which is north of Edmonton. Okay, northeast of Edmonton, but right, you can tell obviously the conditions are different. St. Paul would be cooler and wetter, okay, than Medicine Hat would be. Right? So they have different types of prairie, but they're still prairie. Okay? And you see here, there's like no trees. Okay? In St. Paul, there's, you know, kind of bits of parkland kind of interspersed in there. Again, different soil, more precipitation, cooler temperatures. Okay? So for climate, generally, grasslands experience a significant soil moisture deficit, okay, due to long periods of drought in the late summer and autumn, so August, September. Okay? The stress associated with this probably prevents trees from growing in these areas. Again, trees can grow in some types of prairie, but generally they don't. Okay? Compared to savanna regions, conditions are often less favorable for plant growth. Okay? Again, that has to do with precipitation, and it has to do with temperature. Temperate grasslands do experience winter. Right? There's going to be a period of dormancy due to low temperatures here that wouldn't be present in the savanna, and that's what we can see from the climatogram. This is a temperate climate, not a tropical climate, so we have a bell curve. Right? There's definite seasonality. Okay, we can see that the temperatures range anywhere from, you know, between -5 and -10 during the cold months, okay, to between 15 and 20 in the summer months. Obviously, we know in Calgary it can get warmer than that, but that's an average. Okay, and then our precipitation follows the bell curve. Our wettest months are generally our warmest months. That whole April showers bring May flowers thing is full of crap here. Okay, we don't generally get that. We get April flurries, okay? And then flowers in like June. Okay, so it works a little different. All right, but you can see, okay, that even though in the wintertime we get snow, and like that one on December 21st, we got that huge dump of snow, it was like 40 centimeters. That's 4 centimeters of rain. Okay, because there's so much air that gets trapped in the snow. You're probably noticing here over the last few days with all the Chinooks we've been having. Okay, you probably, if you have migraines, they've been probably terrible for you. Okay, but what we notice is the snow compacting. Okay? The first few days of the Chinook, you don't see a lot of water running everywhere. You just see the snow compact. Okay? And that's because as it starts to melt, the edges of the snowflake become more round. Right? So they become more like grains as opposed to flakes, and they don't trap as much air because they're no longer have sharp edges. They don't catch on each other. They can slide past and shrink. Okay? So the snow compacts and then begins serious melting, which is what we've had over the last few days. Right. Okay, so remember, precipitation in the winter is there, but it's not as much rain, it's not as much water as you might think it is. Okay, when you watch it melt, or you're shoveling it off the driveway and you're seeing the piles, you know, get to be shoulder height. It's really not that much moisture. Right, June's always our wettest month, significantly. Right, that's not true for all prairies, but it is true for southern Alberta. Okay. So vegetation, Canadian shortgrass prairie, dominated by speargrass and grama grass. Okay, those are short, kind of sharp bladed grasses. Okay, mixed grass prairie is going to have wheatgrass, fescue. Okay, we have fescue around here. In the summertime, you see that the grass has kind of got the red seed heads on the top, called creeping red fescue for exactly that reason. It's the kind of grass that's very drought tolerant. The town plants it everywhere. Okay, all the parks and everything are all fescue. Okay. but it does have a kind of a red seed head. It's very, very common around here, by far our most common grass. Okay, you might also have rough fescue, okay, and prairie oak grass, crested wheatgrass, okay, things like that. Okay, are all very common types of grass around this area. Okay. All right, soils, grasslands have really thick topsoils because every year the blades of grass die. Okay, they go dormant and they die. And then the next year it grows from the roots again. So there's all this organic material called thatch that builds up. Okay, it builds up every year and it has to decompose. Okay, this is why with farming you either have to rotate your crops periodically or you have to add fertilizer. Because what are you taking away every time you harvest? All the nutrients, right? You're not leaving that stuff there. You didn't grow a crop to have it fall down and decompose. You grew a crop to sell it, okay? So you're taking away all those nutrients that in a normal prairie, okay, would just decompose and return to the soil and help build up more soil, okay? So with farming, you either have to rotate your crops to be putting in crops where you leave more of the biomass, okay? Or crops that do both that and add nutrients to the soil. Right, so you may see some farmers when they rotate their crops, they'll grow something that's very nutrient demanding, like canola, okay, one year, and then the next year they plant something else. They'll plant like field peas or beans or something like that, because beans and peas will actually add nitrogen to the soil. They have bacteria that live in their roots, okay, that can take nitrogen from the air and turn it into ammonium and nitrates and things like that, and those things can return to the soil in a natural way and don't require the addition of more fertilizer. And then you might grow something that's a little bit more nutrient demanding, maybe some grain or something like that the next year, and then return again to canola. Okay, canola always requires fertilizer. You can't grow it without, but okay, you're going to kind of try and cycle your crops a bit because of that. Okay, fauna. That's animals, by the way. See all the animals in that picture? It's because most of the native animals are gone. Okay? The prairie used to be teeming with herds of thousands of bison. All right? You would barely be able to stand when a herd of bison would go by. Okay? Because a herd of bison could literally have thousands to tens of thousands of individuals in it. Okay? Obviously, planting crops and having bison come by, trample, and eat them all is not desirable. And bison taste good. So two things they had working against them. Okay? Also, they're like dumb. Because you can run them off a cliff. Okay? Which was how the indigenous people here used to hunt them. Okay? You're not taking down a bison with a spear or a bow and arrow. Okay? You could hit them many, many times with one of those and they'll just keep running. Okay? They're very, very tough. So the easiest way is just to kind of spook them and get them headed toward a cliff and run them off. Okay? How many of you have been to Head Smashed in Buffalo Jim? Okay? It's one of the World Heritage sites around here. Okay? But that was a very effective way to hunt buffalo because it was hard, especially before horses were brought over from Europe. Okay? That was the best way. Once horses were brought, it ceased to be sporting at all. Okay? Horses and rifles made hunting bison a lot less sporting. Okay? So they're gone. Most of the predators went with them. Okay? You can't have bears and wolves and things like that when their main energy source, giant herbivores, is gone. Okay? The other problem for bears and wolves would have been that we would have had our own livestock, sheep and cows and chickens and stuff. And we wouldn't want those animals around because they eat our game animals. Okay? So they were also basically chased off of the prairie. So we don't see a lot of the native animals on the prairie. We do see larger populations now of antelope and deer. Okay? Also larger populations of gophers and coyotes. Okay? Coyotes are very opportunistic, so they do better than wolves do now, simply because they'll eat anything. Okay? Scavengers, they'll eat mice, gophers. Okay? They don't necessarily need to take down a deer. They will if they get the opportunity, okay? But they don't need to. They can eat smaller stuff. A wolf has a pretty hard time catching a gopher or a mouse because a wolf is bigger and it doesn't turn as quickly, okay? Whereas a coyote is smaller. Okay? So we don't see the native animals that were here in the numbers we used to. Okay? That would also include moose and elk. There would have been a lot more moose and elk here before as well. All right. Chemical cycling. Chemical cycling works fairly well on the prairies. Again, we've talked about that thatch layer that always has to decompose, but there is a significant barrier to its speed, and that is 6 months to 8 months of frozen conditions where bacteria and fungi and insects are not active and helping that process along. Okay. All right. Temperate, deciduous, broadleaf, evergreen, sclerophyllous forest biomes. Deciduous biomes, basically good enough. Okay, plants are trees that lose their leaves. Okay, so those occupy about 9% of the world's land surface. Okay, it's a very productive biome for a temperate biome. Probably of all the temperate biomes, probably the most productive. Okay, you get the large trees, you get the leaf litter all the time. There's lots of cover and shelter for different types of animals. Okay, so you're going to see quite a bit of stuff going on in these types of forests. Okay, so these biomes occur in warmer, temperate areas. Okay, they also have to have even rainfall, okay, or even precipitation. It can't be like it is here where you get a bunch of dry months and then a couple of wet ones. It's just not going to work. Okay, anytime you're going to have a forest, the rainfall needs to be fairly regular. And that's the key characteristic of the climatogram for a deciduous forest biome. Why am I making a big point to the climatogram? Are you being tested on this again? I put in a climatogram, I ask you what biome it comes from. Okay, so that's why I'm making a big deal out of this. Okay, you can tell this one, it's going to have a bell curve. Okay, the temperature is going to be a bell curve. It's temperate. All temperate biomes have a bell curve. Okay, that bell curve will generally be a little bit higher than it would be for a prairie biome. Okay, but the big difference is more even rainfall. Okay, it doesn't follow the curve. Right, the rainfall is very steady. Okay? So that's the big thing there. Trees require regular inputs of moisture. Even if they are dormant, okay, the soil needs to have its moisture replenished. Okay? So they're characterized by mild winters, moderate precipitation that is nearly constant all year. There are no extended dry periods, and winters are shorter. Okay? Not necessarily like super short, but shorter. Okay, vegetation, okay, temperate forests will have things like oak, beech, hickory, and then they'll have some understory, that's lower level trees, okay, like birch, hazel, sycamore, and maple, okay. Broadleaf, evergreen, temperate forests, that's more like the Mediterranean stuff, okay. They're going to have oak, magnolias, and palms, okay. Sclerophyllous forests, also in the Mediterranean, are going to have things like olive, okay, sessile oak, and pine, okay, because it's hotter. And those plants do well in the hotter stuff. Okay, like tropical rainforests, there is a layering, but not as many layers. Okay, tropical rainforests has way more layers, but okay, these will have some layering. Okay, trees in these biomes are deciduous. That's the other difference in the tropical rainforest. They're evergreen. Okay, so they do lose their leaves before each winter. Okay, now if you're losing your leaves each winter, what's building up on the ground? Yeah, leaves. We call that humus. Okay, any like plant or animal material that's building up that's organic on the surface that needs to be decomposed is called humus. Okay, and these biomes produce large amounts of humus. Okay, that also means that there's a nice layer of covering material on the ground that helps with insulation for subterranean animals. Okay, you put a layer of snow on top of that, and you've got a nice, cozy, warm tunnel to live in. Okay, if you're a subterranean animal. All right, so the soils are what we call luvasolic. You're never going to be asked about that. Okay, they do tend to be a little bit more acidic, so a slightly lower pH. Okay, they can be weathered and leached because again, there's more precipitation in these areas. Okay, but they're generally pretty even in terms of depth. A horizon, B horizon, and C horizon are all pretty much the same in this. In terms of depth, not what they're made of. Okay, the animals, okay, animal life is more restricted in terms of diversity, so short food chains, okay, and again, that is something you're going to see, okay, with these. All right, numerous tree-dwelling animals like squirrels and porcupine can be found. Deer, foxes, pumas, lynxes, okay, and other various mice species will inhabit the ground. Okay, soil organisms are abundant, so lots of bugs, lots of fungi, lots of bacteria, okay, except in needle-leafed forests. So if you have say, if you go to Kananaskis, there's a few places where they have tamarack pine. know what I'm talking about? They're the ones that actually lose their needles every year. Okay? They turn like a fiery orange in the fall. Okay? Those ones, when they lose their needles, can make the soil around them very acidic. Right? And so you're not going to see as much in those kind of places. Okay? Where they're acidic. So we got short food chains, because there are some big herbivores. Okay? Elk, moose, and deer. Okay? They would be directly consumed by wolves. Okay? Or black bear. And then lynx would be eating kind of the smaller rodents, okay, and even secondary consumers, right? Your primary consumers are your herbivores, secondary consumers eat them, but lynx can even eat the weasels and the foxes, okay? I've never seen one eat an owl, though. I think that would be a good fight, okay? Because owls are very predatory and, well, they can fly, so that gives them an escape all the time. We were camping this summer, and there was one eyeing our dog. He just sat in the tree and watched the dog constantly. But, okay, don't let the dog get too far away, because there'll be lunch. He has a small wing. Yeah, so there's lots of kind of shorter food chains, okay? Not bug, and then lizard, and like in the tropical rainforest. Okay, not like that. Okay, chemical cycling is faster than the prairie because there's more moisture. Okay, also shorter winters help that to go along, but again, there still is a period of time where everything is frozen and no decomposition is going to be going on. Okay. All right, the taiga. Right, so the taiga is our probably most common biome in Canada. As soon as you get kind of north of, a little ways north of Edmonton, okay, you're going to start getting into the taiga. If you're in Fort McMurray or Grand Prairie, okay, that kind of north, you're definitely in the taiga. Okay, anything north of that will be taiga until you get to the tundra. And then obviously all of our mountain parks, okay, because there's Alpine taiga and there's Arctic taiga, okay, both caused by temperature, right? But they look very similar, a carpet of spruce trees. Okay, just nothing but spruce. So there's not a lot of diversity, okay? 5, 6 different species of trees, and that's it, and then some grass growing underneath and things like that. Okay, it's relatively undisturbed because it does tend to be in isolated or incredibly rugged areas, making access difficult. Okay, wildfires can become prevalent in the summertime, okay, because there isn't a lot of precipitation in the taiga, okay, and so it can get really dry, as we saw in 2015 when they had all the wildfires there in Fort McMurray. Okay, it does get really dry, and if it gets to the point where you've got like really old growth, where you got a lot of old growth, so very mature trees that are kind of standing deadfall, basically, they're all aged and sick and whatever, that's prime time for forest fires to occur. Okay, and forest fires are not all bad. Obviously, when they destroy people's homes, they're bad, but they're a necessary part of that biome. They're what helps to cycle the nutrients through. Okay, people made a huge mistake with fire management for about 100 years. Okay, especially in the mountain parks. If there was ever a fire, they put it out right away. Okay, they did whatever they could to stop it, not realizing that all they were doing was allowing more and more fuel to build up. Okay, and then you get one fire that just rages out of control because there's nothing but fuel for it. Okay, and so what they do now is they tend to kind of let a fire burn. Okay, they'll stop it hopefully from getting to people's homes and things like that, but if a fire starts, they generally let it go. Okay, because they A, don't really have a lot of choice, but B, it's necessary. If they put it out, it'll only get worse. Okay, and that's why we've seen over the last few years, by few I mean like 30, okay, a lot more big fires, okay, because we suppressed them for so long, and now we've got a problem. Okay. In fact, now Canada Parks and Forestry, they will actually set fires intentionally. Okay. They see a whole area that's they've been ravaged by pine beetle, and there's just a bunch of standing deadfall. They'll go in, create a fire barrier around it, where they'll just kind of bulldoze everything so that the fire can't jump, and they'll light it intentionally. Okay. Kind of just have a controlled burn. Okay, so climate. Some of the coldest temperatures on Earth have been recorded in the taiga. Temperatures can easily dip to -45 or -50 and stay there for long periods of time. Okay, during the growing season, maximum temperatures can range from 25 to 30 degrees. So any plants or animals that live in this area have to be adapted to a wide range of temperatures. Okay? Winter can persist from half to 3/4 of the year. Okay, most snow collects on the ground surface and in spring just runs over frozen soil. So it doesn't get absorbed, it just runs off. Okay, and we see that here. That's why every spring, kind of in June, the rivers come up and they get all muddy, okay, and then they go back down again, right? That's because all the snow in the mountains is finally starting to melt, but all the soil is still frozen under it. So it just runs across, picks up all kinds of debris and silt and stuff and gets in the rivers and just comes, and the rivers come up. Okay, that's what happened in 2013. We had a big, huge snowpack, and then it got warm very quickly, and it poured rain. Okay, the rain fell at the high altitudes, it melted the snow really fast, okay, but didn't thaw the soil. So the soil was not capable of absorbing any of that moisture, so it all ran off into the rivers and caused the flooding. All right, so runoff is important, okay, since approximately half of the annual precipitation can be released in a 1.5 to 2 week period. Okay, so looking at this one, again, it's a forest, and the pattern with forests is fairly regular rainfall. I'm not saying large amounts, it's still a pretty dry biome, but it's distributed pretty evenly. Okay, the wettest month would be August and September, okay, where you'd be getting kind of a rain-snow mix in a lot of those kind of places. Right? So our precipitation for most months is somewhere between 25 and 50 millimeters. Okay, so between that much and that much. Okay, it's pretty dry biome. Right, and you can see again, also got a curve, okay, a bell curve for temperature. Okay, lowest temperatures obviously down, minus 25, minus 30. Warmest temperatures between 10 and 15 degrees. All right, for your vegetation, there's not a lot of diversity, as we said before. Okay, you're looking at things like lichens, black spruce, white spruce, larch, Douglas fir, lodgepole pine, okay, stuff like that. All plants must be frost tolerant and limit their growth, okay, to short periods during the warm season, and plants have to be drought tolerant because rain is limited. And look at the soils they're growing in. What do you see a lot of here? Rocks. Yeah, there's not a lot of like deep, nourishing soil, okay, in this biome capable of holding lots and lots of moisture. Okay, so they're often cold, cryosolic. Cryo means cold. Cryo means frozen. Okay, cryogenically frozen. Cryo means frozen. Okay, so if we've got soils that don't thaw for a very long period of time, then they're not very active either, and that makes it difficult for plants to be active and growing. So short growing seasons, okay, and the soils tend to be pretty thin. Parent material can be sometimes exposed at the surface. All right, animals. Animals, again, have to also be very adaptive, right? Those adaptations could include hibernation during the winter, okay, or having some way to insulate themselves, okay, or migration. Okay, so there's three things. They can stay and be active during the winter, which would require them to have, thick insulated fur, okay, that may even change color. Many of the animals that live in the Taiga have a winter coat and a summer coat, right? You see that, well, even here you see that the deer will shed, okay, or if you go into the mountains in the spring, you see the bighorn sheep and the mountain goats are shedding their winter layer. Okay? They often look sick, but all it is just they're shedding that winter coat. Okay, our rabbits around here change from their summer grayish color to their winter white color. Okay, for camouflage, Arctic fox does the same thing. Okay, so animals have these adaptations. Some animals live beneath the snow, and as I was telling you before, snow is a good insulator because lots of air is trapped in it, and that prevents what heat transfer method. The three heat transfer methods are radiation, convection, and conduction. Which one does snow prevent? Yeah, it prevents convection because the air can't move. It also prevents conduction because conduction only occurs through solid materials, and it's white in color, so what does it do with the radiation? It reflects it back. So if you're an animal that lives underneath a big layer of snow, it can be minus 40 outside, but 10 degrees above zero inside. Okay, so you get that insulative effect of the snow, unless the snow gets compacted. Okay? If the snow gets compacted, then it becomes very dense and loses its insulative value. Right? A lot of animals will hibernate. Ground squirrels will do this. Okay? Now, there's a difference between true hibernators and animals that are not active. Bears contrary to popular opinion, are not true hibernators. Okay? To be a true hibernator, you have to change your metabolic rate. Okay? A bear will sleep a lot, not move around very much, but it doesn't lower its metabolism. Okay? Its body temperature stays the same. Okay? Its heart beats the same amount of times and things like that. It just sleeps a lot. Okay? A ground squirrel, in the wintertime, if you were to like find one that was truly hibernating, you'd pick it up and think it was dead. Okay? Because it would be stiff and cold. Right? Their body temperature will drop below 10 degrees Celsius. Okay? Their heart will only beat a couple of times per minute. They may respire maybe once per minute. Okay? Their metabolic rate just drops. Okay? That's a true hibernator. Okay? Something that lowers its energy needs for long periods of time. Okay? Throughout the winter, a ground squirrel will wake up, okay, and they'll shiver like crazy to get their body temperature up. They'll go and eat some of their seeds, and then they'll go back into a state of hibernation again. Okay? But not all animals that sleep a lot during the winter are true hibernators. Okay? And then you got lots of predatory animals, okay, like wolverine, for example. Anyone ever seen one? You don't want to see them. Okay? You think bears are scary? Wolverines are worse. Okay? There's a reason that superhero is named Wolverine. Okay? That's what wolverines are like. Okay? They have claws, not like his, but they have claws, and they're really mean. Okay? Imagine all the intensity, anger, and whatever of a grizzly bear concentrated into something the size of a German Shepherd. Okay? They are mean. They will chew on your bones and spit them out. Okay? So yeah, you don't want to get them angry. They can be pretty nasty. All right, chemical cycling in the taiga is incredibly slow. All right, a tree falls in the forest, it makes a sound first off, in case you're part of that argument that says if there's no one there to hear it, it doesn't make a noise. When something falls, it forces air out of the way and makes noise. Okay? There is sound, just no one there to hear it. But it'll sit there and it will decompose for years, because for 6 to 8 months of the year it's frozen and the fungi and bacteria and insects are not active and not getting it decomposed. Okay? So a fallen tree can be there as long as a person might live, even longer than that sometimes. Okay? So they do not break down very fast. Okay? What helps is fire. Okay? And fire helps to cycle those nutrients, because when you burn something, obviously it turns to ash, that increases its surface area and it'll break down faster. Okay, tundra. So looking at this picture here, okay, that is taken July the 6th. What do you see in that picture? Snow. Okay, snow will be present in the taiga 12 months of the year. Okay, snow does not entirely disappear in this biome. Right? It may disappear from most places, but there's always going to be some sitting around somewhere. Right? So that means that the soil is barely going to thaw, maybe a few inches deep, and that's it. Okay? That means basically no trees can live in this area because the soil is not thawed, complex, or nutrient bearing. Okay? So what you're going to see is a lot of very short, near the surface types of plants, grasses and herbs and things like that. Okay? So those biomes occupy about 6% of the Earth's land surface. Drastic changes between summer and winter. Daylight in winter is non-existent. Daylight is total in the summer. All right. So if you're a kid and you live in the tundra, it's awesome. Your parents tell you to come home for dinner at sundown, and you come home in August. Okay, because the sun doesn't go down for like 4 weeks. Okay, it makes this circle in the sky. Literally, like you can watch, just does this. Okay, instead of rising in the east and setting in the west, because the Earth is pointed right at the sun and spins like this, the sun just looks like it goes around and around in a circle for 4 weeks. Okay. Now, conversely, around Christmas time, you don't get to see the sun at all. Okay, because you're pointed away from the sun and it just never gets over the horizon. Okay, that's why they call it the dark days. All right, mountain tundra can also have issues that the Arctic tundra doesn't. Because it's at a high altitude, the plants may be exposed to higher levels of ultraviolet radiation. In other words, they can get a sunburn and have to be adapted to that. You have a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, what kind of like countries would this be?
Well, we have a lot of it in Canada, north of the tundra. So if you're in the territories, north of the taiga, you're in the tundra, and above the tree line. So if we're looking at mountains, like that's where this is taken, is in the mountains. This is Alpine Okay, so once you're above the tree line, you're in the tundra. Okay, so tundra is characterized by intensely cold conditions. So we do have a bell curve. All right, it's a very polar climate, so there's a bell curve, and that bell curve is low. All right, very, very low. Spends most of its time below freezing. Okay, you can see warmest month is not even double digits. Okay, coldest months, okay, well down, minus 25, minus 30. Okay, precipitation, it looks really wet, but that's just a matter of scale. Okay, this is not high rainfall. Look at the numbers here. Okay, the wettest month is 65 millimeters of rain. Okay, that would be about that much. Okay, so we're not talking about, you know, miles and miles of rain. Okay, it's still a pretty dry biome. Okay, and when that rain falls, there's not a lot of thawed soil to absorb it. Okay, most of it would just run off. Okay, so vegetation, the term tundra literally means treeless. Okay, so above the tree line. Okay, so this biome is defined by the timberline in the mountains and the tree line at high latitudes. Okay, tundra vegetation is mostly low-growing sedges, grasses, apparently grasses again, it's there twice. Dwarf shrubs, lichens, and mosses. Okay, all stuff that, you know, can grow quickly in a short period of time and then go dormant. Okay, snow cover is very important in controlling the characteristics of plant cover. Okay, if you are exposed in the tundra, you are exposed to high winds, abrasive ice crystals and snowfall, and very low temperatures. Okay, so you want to have snow cover to protect you during the winter. And that's it. Okay, all right, so that covers all the stuff on biomes, and that completes science 10. Nothing else to teach you that's new. So what I will be posting today will be this podcast, but I will also post the review package for Unit 4. Okay. What we will do tomorrow is do our Unit 4 review, and then you have your Unit 4 exam on Monday. Okay. Now, Unit 4 is very short, so there's not a lot of material. So become an expert on that small amount of material. Okay, it's not like any of the other units where it was, you know, I taught it over 4 weeks, and you know, it's hard to remember what we learned the first day. Okay, because I mean, this has been over 4 weeks, but we had 2 weeks off. I really only taught you this unit for about 9 days. Okay, so you need to know the material that's in it very well. Okay, so remember for your exam, okay, the stuff that's going to be important for it is climate, components and factors, okay, being able to read climate graphs, okay. If I give you a location in Canada, okay, you'd be able to look at a map of Canada and go, I think these are the factors that would affect the climate, and they make the climate like this. Okay, that's why we did that climatograms activity, okay, but I'd expect that you were able to do something like that as well. Spoiler alert, I'm going to ask you to do that. Okay, and then heat transfer stuff. There are several questions about heat transfer. Okay, conduction, convection, radiation. Okay, there's a question about the 3 fates of light: absorption, reflection, and conversion. Okay, photosynthesis. So make sure you understand that stuff. Okay, I'll go over all this again tomorrow, but those are the kinds of things you want to start looking at. Okay, because they're the things that are going to be tested. Okay, lots of multiple choice questions on like biomes, pictures and a description. Okay, and terminology. Fair amount of terminology and multiple choice as well. You're going to have a heating curve of water problem, and you're going to have a specific heat capacity problem. Okay, that'll involve a little tiny bit of math, but you guys didn't have any trouble with those types of questions, so just know those are easy marks, those 2. And then there's most of the written is application stuff. Okay, Mr. Clare, I know how to do this, and here's how it applies to something else. Okay. So that's the kind of stuff that we'll look at there. Now, in regards to your final exam, okay, I'm not going to tell you what's on it right now, but I'm going to give you some suggestions for preparation. Okay. When you're preparing for your final exam, try to do it in short sittings. Okay. What I often see people do, and it's a mistake for most people, is to say, all right, on Tuesday, I'm going to sit down and all day I'm going to study. That's a terrible idea. Okay? you are gonna remember the first 4 things you read and the last 4 things you read, and you are gonna forget everything in the middle, okay? So you don't wanna do that, okay? Study in short bursts, okay? Half hour, then take 10-15 minute break, okay? Study for a half hour, take a 10-15 minute break. Make sure you give your brain time to process what you're putting in it, okay? If you just sit down and cram for hours and hours and hours, you're not gonna retain any of it, okay? So make sure you do that. Also, make sure you get good sleep. People really don't give that the credit it needs in terms of success. Okay? A well-rested brain works better, okay, than a poorly rested brain. Pulling an all-nighter is not a good idea. Okay? Spread out your studying time, plan when you're going to do it so you don't have to do that. And be well-rested for your tests. Also, be well hydrated and well fed for your tests, okay? Hydration is really important, okay? Lots of studies on academic performance and dehydration, okay? Dehydration is not just the leading cause of poor performance in athletics, it is also in academics. Your brain needs to be well hydrated, okay? Bring a water bottle to the test. Make sure you've been drinking water before that. Don't chug a whole bunch of water right before the test because you'll have to pee during the test, but okay, make sure you're well hydrated. Okay? And eat properly. I know that sounds silly, but it's true. Okay? If you have black coffee and cigarettes for breakfast, you're probably not going to perform very well on your test. Okay? Have something that's got the 4 food groups in it. Okay? A breakfast that'll stick to your ribs, so to speak, okay, is important. A lunch if you have an afternoon exam. Make sure you're well fed. Bring a little snack with you to the test. Okay? And by a little snack, I mean like a little snack. Right? I have seen all kinds of weird nutritional choices for during exams. Did I tell you about the guy that brought the cooked chicken? Why? He brought one of those, Sobeys Safeway cooked chickens into the test, like the whole thing, okay? And like a baguette and some vegetables, and like, when are you gonna write your test? You got like a 4-course meal here, okay? And it was kind of distracting because obviously they smell, right? There's a strong smell to the cooked chicken, so it was a bit distracting to other people, okay? Same thing with like a 500-gram bag of Doritos. Don't bring that. It's really distracting to everybody else. You have a bag crinkle and you're chewing and stuff like that. So, a granola bar or a banana or an apple, okay? Those are all good things to bring. They get your blood sugar up quickly, okay? And they don't bother anybody else. Don't bring an orange. Peel an orange, your fingers will get sticky, okay? Like stuff like that's not as, it's healthy. It's a healthy choice, but it's not a smart choice, okay? But bring, something to drink, a bottle of water, okay? And, a quick snack for about halfway through, okay? Just to keep you going. Okay? Stuff you need to bring to your final exam. This you might want to write down. Okay? Bring to your final exam at least 2 pencils. Okay? Especially if they're not the mechanical variety. Okay? Bring at least 2 pencils. Bring at least 2 pens. Okay? That way you've got stuff to write with even if something craps out. Okay? Bring your calculator with fresh batteries. Okay? I don't care when you last put new batteries in your calculator. Put new batteries in your calculator right before your test. Okay? Reason for that is this. We come around and clear your calculators before the test. If your batteries are low, we'll input the clearing code and the calculator will say battery low. That means we can't clear it. So I put it in my pocket, I go around, I clear all the other calculators. And then I walk to the office, because I'm not in any hurry, it's not my test. Okay, I walk to the office, I get another set of batteries, I put them in, I clear your calculator, I take them out, I put your dead batteries back in, because you're not getting a free set. Okay, put your dead batteries back in, and then bring your calculator back to you. That would stress me out if I was you, because I'd be without my calculator on a test where I need it for like 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, it would bother me. Okay, it would throw me off. I wouldn't want that for you. Okay, so make sure you got fresh batteries in there. All right, so pencils, pens, calculator, that's it. In terms of school supplies that you need to bring to the test, that's it. Okay, those are all you need. And then we said water bottle, snack, those can be brought as well. In terms of completing the test, It is a 2-hour exam, and that's it. Okay, you get 2 hours and then it's over. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on the time as you're writing so you don't get behind. Okay, my suggestion to you is read the test over. Take 5 minutes at the beginning of the test and read it over. And plan out what questions you want to do first, because you don't have to do it in order. And I don't actually even recommend you do it in order. Okay? If you know for sure you know the answer to a question, do it first. Okay? There's nothing worse than opening up the test, looking at the first question and going, I don't know how to do that. It sets a bad tone for the whole test. Okay? Your confidence is down on the first question. Okay? Do one you know how to do. Start on a good one. Okay? Read it through, and I just rank them. Okay? I scratch off the numbers and I just start writing in what order I'm going to do with it. It takes about 5 minutes. Okay? I wouldn't do that for the multiple choice. I'd do the multiple choice one. But for the written, I definitely pick which ones I knew how to do first. Okay? That way, you don't end up stalling, because I see that happen too. I don't know how to do that question, and you sit there and stare at it. And before you know it, 10 minutes have passed on a 2-hour test and you've accomplished nothing. Okay? That's terrible. Okay? You know how to do a question in the first 30 seconds, move on, do the next one. Don't let the questions you can't do stop you from doing the questions you can do. Okay? All right. I'll talk more about it next week. Everybody grab a mask, grab a paper towel, come around, spray dust it. Oh, okay, go back, dude. I'll come back.
I thought you said that it'd be.
Oh, no, I was saying one.
I see it. Stop.
I'm so sad I got that one question. I felt so bad. On the 40% Dude, that's but I put a negative for it, indicating that it was down.
I went
So,
down.
oh, you were on the table? Did you get 100%?
Yeah.
I got one wrong, and that was the only thing I got.
Well, you got 100%.
Last 4 seconds.
Like, look on power speed. That's all he has. Like, you got rid of 3 of the 6.
Did he get rid of the down default?
No. It's not like any of the questions.
No.
He took your score. He then removed 3 from the geometry.
Oh, so I got 100%. Oh, let's go.
I got 60. Oh, because when he went up to catch the ball, the defender got to the tackle and was basically like he didn't actually make on to like yeah.
See you guys tomorrow.
In between, I have